For those who are making an honest living and producing goods and services that meet the needs of humanity, view those things you're doing that have financial ramifications as kingdom work. Nobody is going to pay you to not create value. And if you are creating value, it is significant. And so this, to me, is what is the need of the hour, is not accepting the sort of premises that so many in the church come to this subject with. That work is somehow some kind of a dirty, messy, inferior, subordinated thing. It is vital to the kingdom of God.
Welcome everybody to the Iron Deep podcast. I have a very special guest, David Bahnsen, today. He's got a book out that really kind of wrecked me in a good way. I really enjoyed reading it. It's called Full-Time, The Meaning of Work. David Bahnsen, how are you, sir?
Well, I'm doing great, and the subtitle, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. So it's even more dramatic than that, even more controversial to say work is the meaning of life.
Yes, I'm in the real estate entrepreneur. A lot of our audience are Christian men that are in real estate or entrepreneurs. And, over the last 10, 15 years or 5-10 years, the landscape of business books that have been affected, this seems to counter or maybe give more in-depth biblical it gives more weight to really what the meaning of work is. I read this book and I was thinking of when I first read, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss, and he had this book called The 4-Hour Workweek. And there were other books that just came to mind. There were sermons that came to mind in the past. I was like, wow, this really just smacks it around a little bit. Are you familiar with Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Workweek?
I am, yes.
Yes. So let's let David kind of contrast the two real quick.
Well, look, the book that I most critique directly in my own book is called Halftime, Moving from Success to Significance. And Tim's book and a whole lot of others, there's just a variety of books in the marketplace that essentially what they're doing is advocating for a lower view of work and to contrast work with the things in life that are important. And it's not usually very subtle. I'm not misrepresenting them. This isn't a straw man. It's in the very title of the book. Bob Buford's book, which has sold 1 million copies, is used as a manual at churches and small groups and men's groups and things like that all over the country. It's called Halftime, Moving from Success to Significance. They're directly stating that our success is different from our significance. And I believe that the whole idea that we spend half of our life, the first half, trying to achieve success, and then we want to now transition at halftime into something that will actually create significance. And similar to Tim's book on a 4-Hour Workweek, it all presupposes that there's something dirty about work, that there's something muddy. First of all, let me say this. If you are in your career for some reason doing dirty and muddy things in your work, then just stop it. If you're rubbing elbows in a bad way, if you're committing fraud, if you're coloring outside the lines with the finances, if you're doing something that is out of bounds, then stop. Whether you're 70 years old or 17 years old, don't do it. But for those who are making an honest living and producing goods and services that meet the needs of humanity, and in a phase of life where they're trying to build a financial base and pay for a house and raise a family and put the kids through school and all the things that people do in a career, don't view that success as at odds with your significance. View those things you're doing that have financial ramifications as kingdom work. Nobody is going to pay you to not create value. And if you are creating value, it is significant. And so this, to me, is what is the need of the hour, is not accepting the sort of premises that so many in the church come to this subject with. That work is somehow some kind of a dirty, messy, inferior, subordinated thing. It is vital to the kingdom of God.
Yes, in the book you outline this, in the as well as the timing of what God says about work. It was established pre-fall, and sometimes we read over that, and then it gets undergirded by maybe some of the sermons or maybe the books that we read. That work is this thing that we have to do, that we have to toil, and this is part of the curse. I had to deal. Your book really, I say I'm not a Gnostic. I'm not. I have no. I reject Gnosticism, but I felt like, oh well, there's a little bit of Gnosticism in Mike's heart that he's got to deal with, and that's one of the things that your books did. And one of the things, a pull quote that I'm going to pull from you, and maybe I'll allow you to give context to it because I've experienced this, and I see this in my church, and it's loud, but no one talks about it. Lazy people far outnumber workaholics in pastors' congregation. When I saw that articulated in your book, I was like, it's just something that I know, but something that no one talks about. It's something that I see at men's group, something when I talk to people. And so what's the antidote to that, David?
Well, the antidote to laziness outnumbering workaholism is to get rid of laziness and to get more people that we would consider to be devoted, focused workers. But laziness is a character deficiency. Laziness does not come because people are working so hard at doing something else well. This is where the self-righteousness and pietism comes in, that some will say, I'm just so focused on my family. I'm just so focused on church. And you go, oh, okay. And they manifest that by slacking at work, by going late, by leaving early, by not putting their all into it. So what I want to advocate here, I don't want to use the word balance because I don't think that's what we're after. I think balance involves making everything fit neatly in your closet. And you're going to have a third of your drawers filled with shirts and a third filled with socks. And, I'm not talking about an asset allocation of life that fits a percentage of work, a percentage of spouse, a percentage of kids. I think that we are to be a parent and a good one and a faithful one full time. I think we are to be a spouse and a good one and a faithful one full time. But I also think we are to be a worker, a good one, a faithful one, an excellent one, a kingdom building one, an ambitious one full time. So this idea that we get to, it's sort of like penance. Like, yeah, I'm pretty bad at my job, but good news, I really kicked the soccer ball around my kids today. I'm not impressed. I find it unbiblical.
You have this a quote. Your chapter start off with a quote, and Dorothy Sayers has a quote about the carpenter and about, hey, you know what? We don't want you to be struggling. If you tell us about that quote from Dorothy, I guess I can read it if I've got it. Give it.
It's one of my favorite quotes in the entire world. And it's every time I hear it, quote it, say it, reflect on it, I am blown away that she said this in the 1940s, because I can't even believe how much worse it has gotten since she initially said it. But she essentially says the duty of the Christian minister has apparently been to tell the men in their congregation to come to church on Sunday and not be drunk in the middle of the week. But what they should be telling them is to build good tables. In other words, if you're a carpenter, be a good carpenter. And of course, we want you coming to church. And of course, we want you avoiding sinful behavior. But the idea that the primary expectation is defined by church attendance and avoidance of sin is a very bizarre, truncated understanding of ethics in the Christian life. We are called to proactively do something. What is it we were called to do? The musician is to write music and perform music. The lawyer is to practice law and advocate for clients. The entrepreneur is to build a business and innovatively create goods and services that meet human needs. The carpenter is to, using the example Dorothy used, build great craftsmanship. Why is that not the spiritual focus? But I think that what we have done is replace that kind of kingdom mentality with something that is far lighter, safer, and frankly done for convenience by just merely pointing out the various obvious things of being at church and so forth. We need to dig deeper. We need to dig deeper because we have a kingdom to build.
We do. I see that quote too, and you just gave it context. I think when you said 1940s, I think the greatest generation, I think of men that just went to work. I think of my grandfather, who was a postal worker and worked 3 jobs. And he was an Italian immigrant, and he lived on the hill in St. Louis, and he worked and had 11 kids. Or no, not 11 kids. I gave too many, 8 kids. That at that point, you're almost a dozen. But another pull quote that I have on this book, and again, the book is full time, and the meaning of the full time in the book is called the full time and the meaning of life, work and the meaning of life. Sorry, so more drama there, David. But this pull quote here, I have a son 21 and another son 15, and this is a big stumbling block that I have in our society with our kids these days. This is from your chapter on the sermon you'll never hear, the infantilization. I don't know if I can say that word. Infantilization. Yes, I'm supposed to. I got a degree in broadcast journalism. I should be able to say this, but I'm not able to. Of young adult men in particular is so well known that it has become the stuff of memes, skits, sitcoms, and movies. It is a theological choice by pastors to preach endlessly about the dangers of work, career, and professional ambition when video game obsessions are a deeper cultural reality. Yes. So what's the remedy here for our young men?
Well, I point out that for the sake of the pulpits, that one thing they could do is stop giving a sermon that equates to warning people in Kansas about tidal waves. Tidal waves can be scary, but they don't get them in Kansas. And I would be concerned with people that are just out working way too much, but give me a break. That just isn't what they're dealing with in their pulpits. They're dealing with people, and I'm now referring culturally, society-wide. A pastor who's trying to be missional in the reality of what they're dealing with would recognize that we're playing 300 million hours a year of just one video game. Just Fortnite is 279 million hours a year. The amount of men in between the ages of 19 and 34 that are living at home, that are not working, that are able-bodied, is at record highs as a percentage and an absolute number. There is obvious infantilization that has gone on where we have told people after they graduate high school, they get an extra decade to grow up. And I don't know why pastors are preaching about tidal waves in Kansas when we're dealing with millions of people. So I'm not referring to an outlier and trying to make it systemic. There's outliers out there, and I can imagine it would be very hard for pastors to give messages to the whole congregation that are based on an outlier. But what we're dealing with in terms of the more systemic issue is what I'm describing. And I would love to see the church become a prophetic witness to the culture, where the most excellent people that can be hired in industry and commerce, in the marketplace, in technology and agriculture are in the church, where not only the character and the ethics and the morality and the honesty, all of that which is vitally important, but the proficiency, the excellence, the technique, all of those things are desirable. And we think of the church not as a bastion of mediocrity, but a bastion of performance.
So you have sons, David. What's your family like? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I have two sons. I have one daughter. So my oldest son is 19 and just finished his freshman year of college. My youngest son is about to turn 14 and ready for eighth grade. He's in the middle of middle school. And then my daughter, who is one heck of a driver, very hard driving, competitive lady. She just finished her sophomore year of high school and will be going into her junior year. So, we're right at that age of kind of pre-adulthood, preparing these three lovely people for the world ahead.
Well, that's also, I suppose your oldest son goes to college. What's he studying? What's that look like for you?
He is looking at a double major in philosophy and economics at this time, but he's still kind of fine tuning some of that. But he's very studious, very thoughtful, particularly throughout his freshman year of college, really has expanded his intellectual curiosity in various aspects of philosophy and theology. And it's been exciting to watch his journey. He loves the Lord and is a very bright young man, and he'll take advantage of these next couple years to really crystallize what direction he wants to go.
A lot of our audience, again, they have our businessmen have children. And what's your philosophy as far as schooling? High school is concerned. How did you guys navigate that with your kids? And what was work like? You have some information about the book about work, some stats about teenagers and work. What was the Bahnsen household like? And maybe not necessarily a template for everybody, but what's your philosophy there on kids, teenagers, work?
Yeah, so it's a good way to put it about a philosophy because it is difficult to template. My father passed away at the end of my teenage years. I was 20, and he was not a person of great means. He was a Christian minister, and for me to have spending money and things like that, I had to work. For me to pay to get a car, pay auto insurance bill, I had to cover those things. So it's not only that those were his rules in terms of how he prepared us and disciplined us and equipped us to be responsible and grow up, but it was also a necessity. It's a very different deal. By God's grace, my kids have grown up in a very affluent home. And yet, while they don't have to want for anything in terms of, spending money and kind of the amenities and luxuries that a teenager would want to have, my wife and I very much have wanted them to learn the character that comes with having a job. And with our oldest, I think we got a little bit lucky because he was just such a naturally hardworking entrepreneurial guy. I think when he was like 16 years old, he was basically running sound and lights at nightclubs all over the Hamptons in New York and at churches in Southern California. He had really just built out a kind of skill set in audio and video production and ran with it and made good money, paid bills and all these kind of things. So he worked all the time, and if he wasn't going to, we would have made him, but he did it on his own and actually did very well with it. Went into college with good, savings and all that kind of stuff. Our daughter is we've made her work a couple little summer jobs. It's been a little bit more of a grind with her. I think she is trying to figure out why she has to do that when she gets such good grades and mom and dad have so much money anyways. Why should she have to go scoop ice cream for a few hours in a summer day? But she does the deal. And like I said, she's a very hard driving kid. So our philosophy, all that to say, our particulars and other families' particulars are always going to be a little different. But what I believe is that it's very difficult to ask someone to be 22 years old and start working their first job ever and think that they're going to know how to take orders from someone or get along with coworkers or have the discipline to show up on time and kind of just deal with the realities of life that sometimes you got to do things you don't really want to do. I want those basic realities ingrained in kids at a much younger age, whether it's an affluent family or a family of much lower means. A lot of families today don't have the kids working jobs because their sports schedule requires them to take 40 hours a week of tournaments, driving all over God's green earth and things like that. I can't get into the particulars for every family. I have my opinions, but I've mostly gone about 20 years of child rearing without ever telling anyone else what I think, because it's none of my business what they do. But philosophically, yeah, I think people should learn to work a little bit. I do.
I like it. I kind of share that when you're laughing about your daughter. I have my daughter who's 18, and it's some of the same sentiment. Hard driving, and has some great questions about why we do things. So I really appreciate that. Kind of to talk about, and in chapter 3 you do this really really well. Is a theology of work, and I really want to end the podcast with you specifically talking to the average evangelical who like me, heard sermons and heard some things about, hey, what we do on this earth, or what the work that we do, it's just work. It doesn't necessarily matter. Maybe we have taken scripture out of context. Maybe we had the wrong teachers. Maybe whatever that reason is. If you can just and you did a great job in chapter 3 of this book, and I highly recommend that you guys read this book because there's a lot more info there. But tell us scripturally about the work that we do here. Why does it matter when we, in the next place? Why does it matter when we go to heaven? What does that look like? And not the ministry work, but really the work that we do to produce.
Well, I guess I accidentally have to use something you just said to kind of set the table for my answer, which is I don't agree that there's a distinction between ministry work and vocational work. And that alone, even that basic compartmentalization, which I obviously know what you mean, and there is a sort of convenience of category. I recognize that the technology sector is different than the finance sector. And when people refer to ministry work in a benign way like you did, what you're referring to is that there's a profession that involves missionaries and pastors, and it's different than the profession of being a tailor a lawyer or doctor, whatever the case may be. And so there are those distinctions, but there is not in my mind, and this is a core Protestant doctrine, the priesthood of all believers. There is not a distinction in the eyes of God between the value of the work that a minister is doing and that a janitor is doing, or a corner office financier. The corner office financier is also not superior to the janitor. There is a higher socioeconomic strata. That part is true. There are market forces that are going to dictate compensation based on scarcity, based on supply and demand, based on barrier to entry, skill level, education. So not all work is going to pay the same. But when you talk about God caring about the worker, this is my basic message to evangelicals. God cares about the work because he made us to work, and this was part of what he intended for creation. And sin entering the world, we now believe as Christians in the doctrine of redemption, that grace restores nature. God is recreating the world through the work of his son on the cross, and now the course of history is a redemptive process to bring us back to the state he intended us to be in. And the state he intended us to be in was a state where we were working, where we were serving, where we were worshiping, where we were producing, where we were creating. God made us to be sub-creators with him. That is why our work matters, regardless of socioeconomic strata and regardless of whether or not it's in a church or in a law firm or at the shopping mall. All of these functions are a byproduct of skills that God's given us that we're to use to his glory. And I believe that message should be a core evangelical message, a core part of what we believe about day-to-day Christian living and Christian identity.
Well, David Bahnsen, full-time work in the meaning of life. A couple notes that I would say is David's or your father, David Bahnsen. I've read a lot and heard a lot of audiobooks on your dad. You both now have done two things for me. You've helped illuminate my scripture reading. I was reading in the Bible reading plan today in Chronicles 29, and after having that, the filter of reading your book, it just illuminated a lot of things for me. Your dad has done the same thing, and for those that know in the podcast or on Iron Deep, I would check out David's work. He's got a lot of work on Canon Plus. If you guys subscribe to that, and there's a lot of resources out there as well. David, full time, the work and the meaning of life. Really appreciate you on the podcast, sir. Thank you. Where can people find you if they want to look for you and follow you on the socials? Where do they go for that?
Well, the book's website, fulltimebook.com, from there will be links to the different socials and my investment writing and other parts of my own kind of public platform and whatnot. So I think that it's such an easy web address. I direct people to go to fulltimebook.com, and then they'll see different links and opportunities there. And we'd certainly love to have you in touch with us.
Okay, awesome. David, thank you. Guys, we'll see you next week on the Iron Deep podcast. Have a great day.